hello. Let me tell you how I read people because I was just learning about quantum computing and it felt a little bit too real for me. So basically, a bit of how quantum computing works. I just started learning about it, but it maps really nicely onto what I've been doing, which is basically if you have an orbiting planet, let's say, you can kind of measure where it is relative to some central point. There is some angle and distance correlated with it. And you can tell based on, even if you can't, so this is actually how scientists figure out how many planets or if there are planets around a sun is by how the sun modulates based on the weight of the planet moving around it, which is crazy and fascinating. But that you can basically tell approximately over time what phase the planet is in if you just draw some arbitrary coordinate quadrant chart on it. But here's the crazy part. So what I do with people is there is the awareness chart, right? That you have your four colors, you see stuff, you think about stuff, you act on stuff, you challenge stuff. And what's really interesting about this is actually, oh wait, hold on. If we do it like this, wait, hold on, wait, wait, hold on. Okay, I'm gonna back up because this is a fresh idea. I don't know if it actually has any validity to it, but you can basically this isn't the entire chart. So somebody's orbit around basically the orbit of an idea around a person is really weird because if it doesn't have enough weight, so basically all planets start in the awareness phase, that you throw an idea or some stimuli or something into this phase, which is the entry phase, and no matter where the planet comes from, it's always going into this quadrant, where basically if you just throw rocks and then see how the planet spins, you can tell a lot of things. The easiest, the few things that can happen is that the planet, the idea is small enough or obvious enough or familiar enough that it basically just gets pulled into it. It's just like that's nothing basically. It doesn't have the weight or the dimension or the whatever else, and it just kind of like it's too obvious that it's not even worth reacting to. The other thing that can happen is that it can just kind of miss the person, so you can just kind of go around it, where they see it and they think about it for a second and they kind of act on it, but it's gone basically. And then ideally, and also it can just like not not process at all to the point of action, or even if they like think about it, right? So it can just be experience and no thinking about it, or there can be some thinking about it and it doesn't turn into anything, for two reasons. Or it can go through and get enough to do that, or it can be enough to challenge, or it can come in the other way, and it can start with challenge and then have the similar, it makes them angry but they don't act on it, and etc. But, whoops, give me back my red. So, what this tells you when you're throwing rocks at people is where the planet or where the sun is, where they are. And that means something very weird, but I'm actually going to have to use a different chart for that. But this is basically the phases of how it works. But if you're trying to tell not only where the sun is, but also if you're trying to get the sun to modulate, if you're trying to get them to resonate with something, it has to be in this nice gray area between too close and too far, right? This stuff is obvious. This stuff is alien. And that's dependent on a lot of factors. Why is that dependent on a lot of factors? Because everyone knows something different, and everyone has different levels of energy and different levels of experience and different levels of abstraction and intelligence and emotional intelligence and everything else that makes this like a 30-dimensional problem. And that's that can be infuriating. But I wanted to lower it a little bit. I'm attempting to abstract my own idea, and it's going to be a little bit ugly. But hypothetically, if the tuning fork theory is correct, and I'm pulling from my very weak understanding of quantum mechanics, is basically that there is you can store a direction to combine with a very high dimensional direction. But let's just go with 2-dimensional for a second. So if you have a 2-dimensional direction, that means you have like 2 coordinates. You have an x and a y. Oh, that's a 5. You have like an x and a y that's basically pointing you in a direction. And that's really interesting. Because humans seem to have the same thing, just in far higher dimensionality, but we're going to stick with 2. So let's take the example of true and useful, which is one of my favorite current. This is true, and this is not true, and this is useful and not useful. This actually tells you a lot of things. So there's basically this gray area in these spots where it's like it's indifference towards the amount of truth or the amount of usefulness. But sorry, this should be useful, not useful, because this is positive, this is positive, this is negative, this is negative. And when somebody is responding to something, you can get a read on how true and or useful something they believe to be based on how they respond, because it spins. And I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm going to keep explaining it, that there is an orbit system where if you get something that really resonates with someone as true and useful, then you will get a high reward. If it's like 5 true and 5 useful, then the response is going to be 25. As opposed to if it's like, oh, that seems true but not very useful, where you might get 5 times 1, then you only get 5, right? That the feedback structure tells you a lot about multiple dimensions simultaneously. And the more dimensions you can stack on top of each other, the higher feedback you're going to get. But that's just the simple version. That tells you something about the direction they're pointed and the gray space in which they can engage meaningfully. Because, again, if it's not far enough, it's going to be obvious. If it's too far away, it's going to be alien. Right? Like, if you don't have an experience or understanding around an area, you can explain exactly how heart surgery works, but if you're not doing it in a way that relates to their experience or understanding, it's not going to mean anything. So, oh my god, I just had like a minor panic attack wondering if I actually was recording the audio of any of this. Anyway, there's this hypothetical direction that they are pointing. And you can also do inverse tests to tell where they negatively resonate. So this is a positive score. This is a positive negative score. This is a negative score. And this is a negative positive score. I'm sure you've been to basic basic math quadrant matrixing systems. But you can offend people, turns out. And what that does is tells you what is the antithetical to their current system, right? That it is anti the thing that they want. So something that is false and detrimental, that something is anti-useful, which is detrimental, and false. Even if you wanted to say, like, intentionally, like lying. So something that is lying and detrimental, like a scam, is going to have a stronger negative emotional effect on people because it is multiplying in an opposite direction. This is negative 25, right? And this is where, like, cringe and shame and fear come in, where it's like those are antithetical to the values you're trying to pursue. But in environments where those things are safe and they're not alien or boring, right? If you have, like, horror movie made for babies or, like, most psychologically destroying thing ever, there is also balance. There's also benefit to experiencing in this space where you have, like, a drama movie or a really good horror movie or catharsis or whatever else, where it's like the movement between these phases is kind of what creates good art, so to speak, where it's safely playing in this space and orbiting it in a way that feels alive, right? If you just have a guy about a superhero that goes undefeated and keeps winning everything he does, and there's no internal or external conflict or nothing else, and it's just good and useful, there's not a story. There's not anything interesting or engaging. The reason why villains are good is because it's pulling the hero. It's basically another gravitational force that's pulling the hero out of here so that he can grow. And that's insane. That's an insane thing to say, in my opinion, because it's just math. It's just this is how I feel like I've intuitively understood human experience for a really long time, and I've never had the words for it because why why the hell are you throwing math at it's subjective human experience? But this is how people work. This is how I experience people, is like they have 100 different tuning forks pointed at particular things, and anytime you play the inverse, it tells you something about that tuning fork, and tuning forks get amplified and flipped and all sorts of other things. So some people can actually be can become afraid of truth. They're like, like there's some associated detriment to it, and then this becomes bad and this becomes good, and then false useful things become the new optimal. This becomes optimal, and then true detrimental things are scary. Like, this happens in real life. I don't know how to explain it, but I see it all the time. Or I guess if you wanted to say no. Anyway, that was the main point. That was like, this is where my brain is right now, and I don't know what to do about it. But I don't know. Tell me what you think. That was a neat video, Lauren. Thank you. Bye.